Richard Werner, he is an economist. You can find him at professorwerner.org, professorwerner.org. Richard Werner, Professor, how are you, sir?
Very well, thank you.
Good
to be on your program.
Yeah, good to have you on again. You're looking at the situation, and it is changing by the hour. What are you feeling, especially you're from Germany? Are you still in Germany today, or are you here in the United States?
I'm actually in the U.S.
In the U.S. right now.
At this moment.
Okay. All right. What is happening in Germany and in Europe, and how's this whole trade thing affecting everybody?
Well, it is affecting everyone because clearly, if you have the sort of list of tariffs that were announced last week, presently suspended, but if you look at the numbers for some countries, these were significant changes. And potentially, even now that they're being suspended, but they're still in place with China, very, very high numbers. You mentioned it, and the triple-digit percentage tariff for China, and China retaliating and this escalating. That is very dangerous because China is part of supply chains across the globe, even involving other countries. And of course, the U.S., President Trump has a point. The U.S. is the most attractive market. Everyone wants to export to the U.S. So it's true that the U.S. has some leverage there. The question is, what do we want to achieve and how do we go about it in order to make sure we actually achieve it? At the moment, there is a risk the situation will escalate, particularly this confrontation now laser focused on China as the bad guy. And, you see in Asia, it's very important not to lose face and not to be publicly humiliated.
Right.
And at the moment, of course, that's why they can't easily give in. One has to create an opportunity, an opening for a compromise, or, even for China to give in.
So what would be
allowed? At the moment, the way it's done is very hard.
President Trump said this yesterday. He said, look, it's important in China that they don't lose face, that they're not humiliated. And he said, I feel like they're being humiliated right now. So what should he be doing while still staying tough? What kind of opportunity should be presented to de-escalate this? I had horrible pain in my hands. I had a hard time moving them. I could barely work with them. I couldn't write or type or anything. I tried everything. Then I found Relief Factor. Relief Factor is a 100% drug-free supplement developed by doctors, and it's safe to take daily. It made a real impact for me and so many others. Try their 3-week quick start now, $19.95 at relieffactor.com.
I think it's important to take it off President Trump is very transparent, does things publicly, but maybe in this case, where we are at this point, it's important to take it off, the public focus, and have some private conversations with the Chinese leadership. And maybe they even suggest a way in which this may be done. Essentially, one needs a face-saving solution that makes both sides look good. This can be done because the Chinese are as much interested in, making a deal as President Trump is. The Chinese are famous for commerce, for trading, for doing deals. So it just has to be done in such a way that they're not forced into a corner, and then they feel obliged to also, stand up to what appears to be bullying to them and appear tougher than they actually should be at this stage. So I think it can be done. I'd be glad to help, get me into the Trump team. I've got good relations. I was invited to be professor of finance at one of their top universities, Fudan in Shanghai, met very senior people in China. And, I've been in Japan for 12 years. I know how to talk to them in Asia. At the moment, there is perhaps, this lack of the right approach. But it's fantastic news, as you mentioned, that President Trump is now acknowledging this. And I think this creates an opening with the right advice. The other point I'd like to make, actually, is that I think it is very smart of President Trump to raise fundamentally the tariff issue and how the U.S. had not always been treated equally by other countries when it comes to trade and tariffs. That is very valid. And tariffs in history have been, well, actually mixed, but they have been very successful and good for America and also for other countries that use them if and when they're used in combination with the right policies, domestic policies. And that's where I think the Trump team still needs some good advice. The Trump team knows that this official mainstream neoclassical economics, is not to be trusted, and that's very true. But they're still lacking the right advice. I'm an expert in high growth economics, and I think the U.S. can have 15% growth for 40 years like China had. This can be done. There's no real.
What needs to happen?
If you have the right policies in place.
What needs to happen? What is he missing? Well, because I think what's missing is the Congress doing their job and putting other things in place. What are you saying is missing?
Yes. Well, it's a key thing is to do with money. And those who create money. Now, the Fed has created a lot of money, far too much, in recent years, and has caused inflation and everything. But actually, normally, central banks only create 3% of the money supply. 97% of the money supply normally is created by who? The banks, the banking system. And the banks normally, and this is capitalism, where you don't have central planners making decisions, but you've got private, commercially oriented enterprises making decisions. And so the more diversified your banking system, and particularly the more small local banks you have, the stronger your economy, the stronger job creation. And that's where in the past the U.S. has been extremely strong. But in recent years under other presidents and the other regulatory authorities have really reduced the number of small local banks. I mean, there's been a collapse in the number of community banks and local banks almost across the United States. And that's very bad for job creation and for small firms and their competitiveness.
Yes.
And China is the best case in point. They used to have this centralized Soviet-style system with only one bank. And then when the leader Deng Xiaoping came to power in 1978, he felt, let's forget about all this ideology under Chairman Mao. Let's deliver outcome. Let's deliver performance and growth. How do we do it? Well, let's learn from those who did it. And he went to Japan and asked the Japanese, what's your secret of success? And they told him, you need banks. How many banks do you have? One bank. Are you serious? For 600 million people at the time, something like that. Well, you need more banks than that. How about 5,000? And that's what he did. So he went back to China and created 5,000 small banks, local banks, village banks, credit unions, regional banks, rural savings banks, provincial banks.
So what does Trump need to do that here?
That lend to small firms. Sorry?
What does he need to do to create that here? How should he be encouraging?
Well, first of all, one needs to take the pressure off the small banks to merge because the Federal Reserve and the FDIC have been closing banks and forcing them to merge. That's why thousands of banks have disappeared in the U.S. I mean, job creation, politicians talk about job creation, but who is the main employer? It is small firms.
Yes.
SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, employ between 65 and 75% of total employment. And there is a special thing about small firms. They can't get money from capital markets.
Correct.
Wall Street is not open to them. Their only external source of funding is banks.
Local
banks. With banks, that we all have another rule. Big banks don't lend to small firms. It doesn't make sense. So who lends to small firms? It's only small banks. And that's why America in the past was very strong. When there were, going a few decades back, we had more than 20,000 banks, mostly these thousands of small local banks, community banks, and that was great. But the regulators and the centralization have led to mergers, and the number of banks have been going down rapidly. FDIC closing down healthy banks. For some reason, they think it's a good idea. Same in Europe, the ECB, European Central Bank, says we have too many banks. We have to close the small local banks. Well, that's how you kill the middle class.
Right.
That's really what happened to the middle class, that the small firms are not supported anymore. When there's a new technology coming out, the small firms, they're not necessarily the innovators, but they're the ones that have to quickly adopt the new technology. And for that, you need money. If you have a small local bank that knows you, you will get your funding, you can upgrade, you can maintain your market share and stay competitive, expand jobs, basically. But in countries where the banking system gets too concentrated, and the U.S. is now at risk of becoming one of those countries.
I know.
For example, look at the U.K., 5 big banks. The small firms get nothing from these big banks.
But isn't this...
Because they can't afford to do these small loans. They have to do big business. They lend to the hedge funds and private equity funds in billions. And then that works for the big banks. Well, is it really good that the U.S. is heading that way? No. We have to change that. So we have to change policies at the FDIC and also at the Fed. They have to be bank-friendly and therefore small firm-friendly and therefore employment-friendly. So if we combine the tariffs with the right monetary and banking policy, the U.S. can be hugely successful.
All right.
I mean, Glenn, you've got good connections. Help me to get to the Trump team.
I'll put a word in for you, but I mean, I'm lucky to talk to the janitor. So, Richard, let me go to Europe here for a second, because I think what Trump is trying to do on many of his things is to break this elite, almost World Economic Forum grip on dismantling the West. He doesn't believe in the slow decline of the West. He is looking to change directions 180 degrees. And I think that's part of what these tariffs on Europe and everything else is, to say, look, we're going in a different direction. We have to go in a different direction. Who's with me? Do you read it that way or not? Well, I think that is certainly is one possibility, and that would be that would be a good goal, because Europe is really still under the thrall of World Economic Forum and the deep state, and including the U.S. deep state. Is still very active in Europe. We mustn't forget that. So sometimes when President Trump ends up arguing with European leaders, he is still arguing with his old nemesis, his old enemy, which is the CIA. They're running Europe. They've got all their assets in place. And, of course, the World Economic Forum is a CIA asset. It was under Kissinger that the CIA funded this program which brought Klaus Schwab to the fore. So President Trump needs to realize that he's still fighting the old enemy, but now, he won domestically, but, the old enemy is strong in Europe and other places still, where they've had the foothold through the traditional military foreign bases, where the U.S. Army is and so on, Japan included. And that explains a lot of this friction. And so, yes, in many ways, it's good that Europe sees, there's going to be a change of policy, but they're just going to now, while they're still under instruction from their minders at the CIA, they're just really agitating against the United States, against Trump. They're talking about, we have to decouple. We can't trust America anymore at all. We're going to, and when the reality is they're now just totally still following their minders, the deep state minders, World Economic Forum.